My name's Maggie Beal. I'm Director at the Department of Housing and Community Development. It is my pleasure to be here today to talk to you about broadband, particularly because it is Virginia's success story. So this is one of our favorite topics at DHCD. And as the chairman mentioned, Dr. Holmes and her team have done yeoman's work here. And so my job is to introduce you to sort of where the picture of where we're at on broadband, and then turn it to Dr. Holmes to tell you about the technical parts of deployment that are underway. So here, we're going to quickly cover sort of when we talk about broadband, give some quick terms so that we're all talking about the same thing, explain what we do year round, and then give you an update on where we're at today. So when we talk, broadband means high-speed internet, and specifically that means that you have to be 20 megabits per, which megabits is not something I'm used to talking in, but so we want 100 megabits per second download and 20 megabits per second upload. And so we are technology neutral in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We are happy to deploy all broadband technologies that help homes, businesses, and community centers access high-speed internet as long as it meets these technical specifications. The Office of Broadband is within the Department of Housing and Community Development. They maintain their many important roles are maintaining the maps of locations that we have yet to connect to broadband in the state. And so we work with GIS through Virginia Tech and go location by location, address by address, to look at homes or businesses and identify their tree cover, their nearby buildings, and identify what technology will best serve them. And then that data is aggregated by zip code. So our program is built to be as localized as possible, but still deliver at scale. And we're using that data, this map. When we talk about the broadband map, what we mean is that individual level data, and then aggregated by zip code to make funding decisions that are best for that specific locality. So once we have that map and we've set our goals, we're combining state and federal dollars to deliver broadband to the Commonwealth. And we will talk, Dr. Holmes will talk in specifics about how each funding source is being used to reach all of those homes and businesses. So here you see a list of those funding sources, VADI being the name we use to mean our overall program, but it's also a funding source. That's the general fund funding source enabled by this body. We in Virginia have had long-term bipartisan support for broadband deployment, and that has allowed us to be the leader in the nation for broadband deployment. Virginia is delivering 3 times more broadband connections every month than any other state in the nation. So it is something that you should be immensely proud of, and has been made possible by this body through bipartisan sustained support over 12 years of this program. In addition, Dr. Holmes will talk in detail about our federal funding sources, including LECAP and BEAD, which are really, and we're rolling out BEAD now, and there's some really exciting news about how far we can go with this next step. So as you see in the chart here, funding for broadband has been sustained over a long period of time by bipartisan support, both among governor's offices and the General Assembly. But Virginia was one of the first to dedicate COVID-era ARPA funding to broadband in a very substantial way, and that's what put us ahead of the curve. So so Virginia's program builds 5,000 connections a month across the state. And we're always proud to speak, when we speak locally, to say you may be seeing a trickle here locally, but when we aggregate that across the Commonwealth, there's a flood of broadband connections being made. And it's something that we are bringing to your door as fast as possible and faster than anybody else. So with that, let me turn to the real expert. Dr. Holmes, will you come tell us about each of these funding sources and how we are achieving this goal?
Thank you, Director Bill. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on broadband deployment across the state. I'm going to remember to click and talk at the same time, so I apologize if there's a delay in this moving the slides. So as you see on the slide in front of you, we're almost at 90% coverage across the Commonwealth. We're about 88% of homes, businesses, and community anchors currently have access throughout the Commonwealth, and there's a remaining 12%. And I'll talk about that 12% shortly in the presentation. And so we have three major programs that we administer in the Office of Broadband: the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative, the LECAP program, which is the Line Extension Customer Assistance Program, as well as the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. And all these programs combined will allow us to get to almost 100% is what we call universal connectivity across the Commonwealth. Just to share back a look back for folks who may not know, I like to say we've been doing broadband before it was cool. As Director Bill said, we were one of the first states to significantly invest American Rescue Plan dollars to address broadband connectivity. And so what the slide in front of you depicts is really the last almost, I can't believe I'm going to say this, 9 years of broadband investments through the Commonwealth. It's always been a program that's been oversubscribed. If you look at the funding requested as well as the funding awarded, the demand has always exceeded the amount of money that's been allocated to the program, but that is yet to change. And so we have addressed about 406,000 locations through investments over the last 9 years. And the other thing I will share is that in 2018, it was estimated by the Commonwealth Connect group that about 660,000 homes, businesses, and community anchors had lacked broadband in 2018. And so what we also want to share with you is we've made great strides in closing the digital divide across the state. We stand at 88%. As I said earlier, multiple funding streams have contributed to our success: the VODI program, the LECAP program, and the BEAD program, which is yet to come. And then there's also federal programs such as USDA Reconnect has also been deployed by the federal government across the Commonwealth. We are focused on closing the remaining 12% that was presented about 2 slides ago. And so what this map in front of you shows is this is actually a layer in our Commonwealth Connect map, which is actually developed in partnership with Virginia Tech Center for Geospatial Information Technology, excuse me. I know a lot of acronyms, but trying to spell them out is kind of hard. And so we have a partnership with them. The funding is actually provided through the General Assembly to keep this map updated on a yearly basis. And so the orange areas of the map are areas that are served. The green areas of the map are areas that are funded through VODI. And what that means is they're currently under construction across the state. And then lastly, the purple areas are locations that are funded through the BEAD program, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. The Commonwealth was allocated $1.48 billion to address remaining locations in the Commonwealth that are not currently funded through the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative, or LECAP. And the white areas are areas that are funded through other federal programs, maybe the Reconnect program through USDA, and there are also programs through the Federal Communication Commissions. And then lastly, of course, we have a lot of National Forest land and National Park Service, so those areas tend not to have broadband connectivity. So the areas that are white are areas that are either federally funded or maybe like a national forest or national park. And just to kind of give you an update on where we are in terms of progress, what you see in the chart in front of you are the locations that were awarded by each year and where we're at in terms of construction. And so in fiscal year 21, we awarded funding to support connectivity in 25,314 locations. What you see here, we're over 90% completed. We have a little less than 1,000 locations from fiscal year 21 that were awarded. In fiscal year 22, we have funded that was our largest funding source for funding year for the VODI program. That was when we received a plus up of American Rescue Plan dollars. And so about 285,925 locations were awarded through that round. We're steadily ticking that down, and we're slightly more than half of those locations currently have connectivity today. And then fiscal year 23 and 24 are our smaller allocations. In 23, we had about almost 30,000 locations. In fiscal year 24, we have about 16,000 locations that are also currently under construction. And you see in fiscal year 24, Those projects are just getting underway and starting to build out across the state. So I always like to share, I'm a very visual person, and so what I think is important to share is the true impact of our body investments. And so what I like to do is highlight Bedford County. And so what you see in front of you is the map on the left is Bedford County in broadband coverage in 2022. The map on your right is broadband connectivity in Bedford County in 2025. You will see that I tell someone when I try to explain to what I do when my kids were younger, how do I explain my job? I said, I'm coloring in a map of the Commonwealth of Virginia with broadband connectivity. And this is literally us coloring a map in Bedford County. And so you'll see there's been significant increase in broadband availability in Bedford County since the investments in 2022. And there are many, many more examples like this across the Commonwealth. A smaller program that we administer at the Department of Housing and Community Development is a line extension customer assistance program. And so for many folks that live in rural communities, homes are set a significant distance off the road. And so when those families call their local cable company or a telephone provider, they often have to pay an additional cost, which is called a special construction cost. And so often families do not have these additional dollars to cover those costs. This program was established by the General Assembly in 2022 for us to cover those costs 100% to the front door. So this gets broadband from the road to the front door of a home. And so since its inception, the LEAF CAP program has received over 1,500 applications. And as of November 25, 503 homes have been constructed with about 85 remaining. The reason there's a big distance between the number of homes that have applied for the program and the numbers that have been completed or are currently under construction is as we identify those homes. Director Bill talked about the mapping earlier. A lot of times these homes appeared on maps previously developed by the federal government as served, but when you get to the residents, they actually weren't able to get service to their front door. And so what we've been able to do is identify 1,500 homes that had this problem, of which 500, over 600 have qualified for the program. This is income-based. Families that were making less than $170,000 a year qualified for the program. And so we've been able to actually get more families connected that were not covered through the program by just identifying those homes and providing that information to their local cable or telephone providers to get access. And so this program has been oversubscribed, but it's been fully committed, and we're getting ready to close out this program towards the middle of this year. So the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, Virginia has been allocated $1.48 billion under the Federal Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act. And so what you see in front of you is the timeline. I jokingly say this is the longest program I've never actually gotten a chance to administer because the program actually started, if you think back to when the IIJA law was passed in November 20, I think it was in 2021, November. We actually started working on this program in June 2023. And we submitted all of our documents to the federal government. Virginia was first, as always. We like to be first in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we continue to do that even in the broadband work. And so we did get approval to go ahead and develop our plan in 24. And then in 25, which was last summer, we had actually completed our first round of the BEAD deployment allocations, and then we had to pull back, and there were new rules set up through the Trump administration. And so we were first, even under those new rules, to resubmit and allocate $545 million in grant funds for deployment projects across the Commonwealth. That funding will be used to address 85,000 locations in the Commonwealth that are currently identified as unserved through the program. And so just to give you an update, I know we presented to JCOTS, and we also had a Broadband Advisory Council meeting in November to share where we are now with the BEAD program. Director Bill just signed the contract literally last week, and so we have access to both our $545 million as well as our administrative dollars to staff up, which we are currently doing to get the program underway. In December, my staff decided that before they took their Christmas break, they would actually go ahead and have 23 contract negotiation meetings. And so we've already negotiated with every single awardee, which I'll present shortly, for the BEAD program, so that they are currently working to get those contracts underway. And to kind of share with you where we are in terms of the mix of technology, as Director Beal said, the Commonwealth has been technology neutral. We've been that way through the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative Program, and we push to stay that way through the BEAD program. And so just to give you a breakdown of where we are in terms of technology that will be deployed, almost 80% will be fiber, 13% will be low Earth orbit satellite technology, about 6% cable, and then less than 2% will be licensed fixed wireless. And so this is the technologies that will be deployed through the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. And for those of you who have been around for a while in the broadband space, you might have heard a number that was said previously around BEAD. We used to say about 133,000 locations were in the BEAD program. Or there's this weird thing when you have a map that's developed by the federal government and they use satellite technology. Oh, the irony, I just said satellite. The difference is that a lot of what we thought were homes and businesses were actually rocks, hay bales, abandoned structures. And so if you look at the 133,000, actually 85,000 of them are actually what we consider serviceable locations. And so those are locations that have an address that can actually get broadband service. And so this is the breakdown by technology. And so as always, we are currently mapping. And so you'll always find a map with broadband deployment. And so what you see in front of you is a breakdown of the 23 internet providers that won through the BEAD program. And so the next slide is actually the percentage breakdown, well, the numbers broken down by providers. And so you'll see we have a mixture of 23 internet service providers. All of them were screened on technical capability. Director Beal talked a little bit earlier about terrain. And so we made sure that locations that were able to receive certain technologies reliably receive that type of technology. Virginia is 9th in the country for tree canopy. And so we wanted to make sure that locations that were in areas that had high density or high tree coverage did not receive a technology that would not be reliable to their structure. And so with that, I will conclude my official technical part of the presentation, and we will entertain any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Holmes. Director Beal.
Mr.
Director
Chair,
Beal?
we buried the lead here, and that's my fault. Dr. Holmes didn't get to say that by funding all 85,000 locations for the BEAD program, we will reach full coverage in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We will be the first state in the nation. Yeah. No, it's your accomplishment. So yeah, we will be the first state in the nation to reach all homes, businesses, and community centers in the Commonwealth. So it's worth taking an extra moment to say that. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, members, use your request to speak button, and you'll show up in the queue for me. First, we have Delegate Singh, followed by Delegate Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it my understanding is that a majority of this BEAD funding that comes in goes to these internet service providers. Does any money go to municipalities, or is it just ISPs?
So, Mr. Chairman, may I?
Dr. Holmes.
So the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program differs from the VADI program. And so the VADI program, we do partner with local communities, municipal governments, and then they partner with an internet service provider. The BEAD program is structured where the Commonwealth of Virginia actually runs the competitive process, and we directly contract with the provider, so that is correct.
Thank you so much. Chair recognizes Delegate Lopez.
Thank you, Speaker. I have a couple questions, if it's all right, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate Lopez.
We sort of have run past the fact that in June of last year, the Trump administration put forward new rules for the BEAD program, specifically as it relates to what is allowable and what's not allowable. And so there was a bullet on maybe one of the slides Ms. Beals had. It said $800 million in unspent or non-deployment funds. Now, of the $1.48 billion we got, that's a significant chunk. And so when you say that we're going to achieve the full coverage, how are you going to do that with the fact that over half of the money that we got under BEAD has still not been sent to Virginia?
Take a first crash. Can you help? Okay. Thank you, sir. That's a very prudent question and one that we spend a lot of time thinking about. So when Mr. Lopez talks about deployment and non-deployment, that's how the federal government identifies the difference between laying cable or deploying satellites to get internet versus all of the other support services that help Virginia with telecommunications. And so we are reaching full deployment for broadband access in the, we are funding full deployment for broadband access in the Commonwealth. There remains $800 million in the state's account at Treasury that is set aside for non-deployment uses, and that's by federal definition. And our goal is to use that to fill out the map when we talk about other ways that, really make telecommunications possible. So taking broadband not only to your apartment building door, but to your apartment inside the building. Making sure that we cover all, how many thousand miles of roads?
Oh, how many thousand miles?
12,000 miles of roads in Virginia, I think, but is that right? Okay, 12,000 miles of roads in Virginia do not have cell phone coverage, and we would like to make sure that that gap gets filled. And so we're talking about ways that telecommunication can be fully mapped in Virginia. That's what we talk about when we mean non-deployment. And yes, sir, there is a lot of uncertainty about that money, but it remains in our account, and we wait for further guidance.
Right, and so follow-up question, Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes Delegate Lopez.
So the NCIA has actually defined, they haven't put out the directive yet, have they, about what the non-deployment funds are allowable, what allowable uses are? And so what I'm concerned about is, considering the fact that the Trump administration hasn't actually defined what we can use the money for, even though it was allocated before in the previous administration, how do you actually know that you're going to be able to accomplish a lot of what you're trying to accomplish, especially considering the fact that as a part of the 2017 tax bill, they decided to tax telecommunications after you'd already, I think in some states, set up contracts with companies to the point of 20%. And so people are having to fire people that they'd hired to put these projects in place. And then on top of that, the last question, Mr. Chairman, or first off, if you can answer that question, I'd appreciate it.
Question, Delegate Lopez, your question?
The question was, seeing as how there is no actual definition yet, and NTIA has not actually given us allowable uses for non-deployment funds, how are we making the intellectual leap that we're going to get there quickly and before everybody else?
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Dr. Holmes.
Okay. So the $545 million, so of the $1.48 billion, $545 million has already been released to the Commonwealth to address the 85,000 locations that I presented earlier, actually here on the slide. Oh, the slides are off. Presented earlier in the slide deck. The remaining $800 million would be available for what is considered non-deployment. In the notice of funding award that was put out by the Biden administration, there were a laundry list of eligible uses. We're currently waiting for the Trump administration to put out their list of eligible uses for that $800 million. And so they commit to releasing that guidance by March 11th this year. And so they have released the money we need to get the projects that are currently underway for construction, for contracts. We're ready to get those started as soon as those internet providers meet all their contractual requirements. And then the $800 million, we will have to submit an application to NTIA once they issue that guidance to let us know what would be eligible. You are correct. We do not know what is eligible through that program. However, it is our hope they do not deviate from the original notice of award that came out under the previous administration, which is in federal statute.
Final question, Mr. Chairman.
Final question, Delegate Lopez.
So have we had any actual corporations that are actually putting these projects in place across the Commonwealth for last mile, medium, rural mile broadband deployment? Have any of them been affected by the fact that you have this after the fact tax on the grants and the sub-grants that they've been getting from the federal government?
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Dr. Holmes.
I do not know the answer to that specific question. We would have to look into that. I will tell you, we just reran the entire application process, so all providers who submitted applications in fall of last year should have included any costs that may have been related to any increase in costs based on the new legislation that might have been passed by Congress. We ran an application round under the Biden administration. We had to rerun the entire application round under the Trump administration, and so providers adjusted their costs based on any new information that might have changed between both administrations in Washington. And so it is our hope they would have included that, but we will look into that for you.
So one of the things I'll just take the chairman's prerogative to say is that we really appreciate the threading the needle that you all have been doing, as this process has been a start, stop, veer left, veer right, and we have kept all of the balls in the air and continue to advance here in the Commonwealth. So we appreciate your leadership. Next up, we have Delegate Maldonado, followed by Delegate Sebo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to echo the thanks and gratitude for all the work that you've done. We know this is Herculean in nature and one of those things that we call a sprinted marathon. So it's not quick, but it's intense, and you've done such great work. I did have a quick question, clarifying question. When you said Virginia would have full coverage, will be one of the first states to have full coverage, when do you think that will be? So I'll let you answer that, and then Mr. Chair, have one follow-up.
And so, Mr. Chair, okay.
Dr. Holmes.
Okay, and so the way the BEAD program works is that we will get the projects under contract in 2026, and so the goal is to have the projects be completed by 2030. That is the time frame that we are required to have the projects complete. So by 2030 is the anticipated date.
Follow-up,
Mr. Chair.
Construction will start this year, though.
Follow-up, Delegate Maldonado.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that. I am curious, because there is some uncertainty around the non-deployment portion of BEAD funding. Can you tell us at the committee some clear examples of what happens if we don't have access to the non-deployment funding?
Go ahead. Mr. Chairman.
Dr. Holmes.
And so the Commonwealth has primarily invested, as discussed this morning, in infrastructure. And so our proposal for BEAD non-deployment funding is to look at the other two pillars in closing the digital divide. Director Beal's first slide talked about access, adoption, and affordability around broadband. And so the proposals that we had come up with would start addressing, as Director Beal said earlier, cellular connectivity to make sure not only that you can get internet in your home with your computer, but also being able to utilize your cell phone. And so we looked at other ways to improve infrastructure access. And so the goal would be able to start looking at things like multi-dwelling unit connectivity. Folks have access at a building, but they don't in their individual units. And so the priority is to focus on infrastructure-related needs if eligible for that funding. Those are the priorities. And then adoption, we presented to the Broadband Advisory Council in December 24 what are considered adoption programs. And so that would have been with state agency partners that would talk about device distribution, look at digital literacy and upskilling of residents of the Commonwealth to make sure that they're able to not only have access to technology, but be able to utilize the technology in a safe way. And so those were our proposals back in December 24.
Thank you very much. Next, we have our final question from Delegate Sebo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm also a visual learner, so I'm very grateful for your slides. I particularly really enjoyed the slide where you showed us the progress from 2022 to today, and it's very impressive. In fact, it's bringing back many memories for me, Mr. Chair. I was honored to be elected in 2022, and representing a very urban area, I sat down, one of my first meetings was with the Farm Bureau, and so this was new territory for me. And so I asked them, what is the biggest challenge? And I was expecting like something animal related, right? And then their answer to me was access to broadband, and it really like hit me at that moment, how the technology in farming is changing and how important it is in these rural areas to have access. So I'm really just wanted to commend you and thank you for all of your hard work over these last few years to making sure that all Virginians have access to broadband. Just one last question, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind.
Delegate Sebo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. You mentioned very briefly something about cell phone coverage, and I am carrying a bill that aims to increase cell phone coverage throughout Virginia. So I wouldn't mind if you would. I would really appreciate if you don't mind, if you could elaborate a little more about that and how it interacts with broadband.
Sure. So cell phone coverage is one of the issues we want to reach with non-deployment funding. So it is not eligible for deployment funding being high-speed internet, but it would be eligible for the other IIJA funding under BEAD. if we get this assuming we get this non-deployment funding. And so we're anxious for guidance, the rules of the road from the Trump administration to make sure that that's an eligible use, but it's something that we would like to jump into as soon as the rules of the road are published on non-deployment funding, that $800 million that remains in our account at Treasury, Virginia's account at Treasury, but we cannot access it until they publish those rules.
Thank you so much. Members, I do apologize.